Welcome, everyone. We are just waiting another minute here to get started. Let anybody finish joining us here. We'll start right at 4. Okay, it's 4 o'clock. We can go ahead and get started here. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And we also have a lot to squeeze in this short hour. So we'll go ahead and jump in. My name is Holly Greer. I'm with the Alachua County Environmental Protection Department. I'll be speaking today about the HOA Florida Friendly Landscaping Code. We also have Cynthia Nazario Leary, who is our Alachua County UF IFAS Extension Agent, and she'll be talking about the Florida Friendly Landscaping Principles. And we also have Jennifer Marvin, the Florida Friendly for Home Landscapes statewide coordinator for the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. And she'll be talking about strategies for working with your HOAs to implement Florida Friendly landscaping. We do have kind of a tight schedule here, so we're going to wait and take questions at the end of the presentations. So as we go along here, if you can just jot your questions down, or you can put them into the chat box, and we'll get to those at the end. If you could also make sure you're muted for the presentations, we would appreciate that. And with that, we'll go ahead and jump in. Literally, you'll see with the next slide. So you see what I did there with this picture. So why does Alachua County support Florida Friendly Landscaping? Why do we have this code? So really, it's because we have, even though we live in a state where it seems like our water is very abundant, we only have about 1% of the water on the planet in fresh water that's readily available for human use. So we really need to protect this finite resource, and Florida Friendly Landscaping is a way to encourage sustainable practices that will help us to protect both the quantity of water that we have available and the quality of that water as we move forward. So our water comes from most of the state. Their water comes from the aquifer, and we're no exception here in Alachua County. We all depend on the aquifer. It's where we get the water we use for bathing, for drinking, for filling our pools, for our landscapes. And this is this unique and beautiful system that we have. This photo by John Moran is one of my favorites. But it's out of sight because our water is underground. We want to make sure it's not out of mind. So Florida Friendly Landscaping helps to protect water, and that's kind of the big picture here. So in addition to that aquifer taking care of all of our human needs, the aquifer is also feeding these unique natural systems that we have that have such an allure. We're getting new people moving into this area all the time, which is another reason we really need to protect our water, because with more demand on that water, we really need to make sure we're protecting the quantity of water that's in the aquifer. It also means more pollution threats when we have more people moving here. So the aquifer feeds the springs and rivers in our area, and these really are gems. We value these places. It's part of what makes our region so beautiful. So we've got springs that are in Alachua County and springs that are surrounding the county that are so important. We really want to protect those aquatic systems and the wildlife that depend on them also. So let's take a look at why we focus on outdoor water use and landscaping in particular. So this graph shows kind of a statewide summation of water use when there's an irrigation system present for residential properties. So you can see it's estimated about 50% of water can be attributed to irrigation when there's an irrigation system present. And really here in Alachua County, we're finding that's closer to 60% of residential water use when an irrigation system is present is attributed to landscape irrigation. So we can really affect some serious water conservation through just curbing our water use in our landscapes. So we know that our landscaping choices affect the quantity of water available and the quality of water available. So let's talk about our landscaping, our water use in Alachua County. So the average daily water use, and this was a study done with newer homes, but it really applies more widely. If there's an irrigation system present, the homes can expect to use about more than double the amount of water if there were not an irrigation system present. So you can see that's really significant water that's happening when there's irrigation present. So curbing our habits is really going to help address water conservation. So, and 90% of our homes, new homes, are still going in with irrigation as kind of that package deal. So we really want to affect positive change. And how does Florida Friendly Landscaping help with that? By encouraging native landscaping and drought tolerant species and species that are the right plant in the right place. All of these things mean less water needed to maintain a healthy and beautiful landscape. Florida Friendly Landscaping can also help because landscaping choices affect water quality too. So our stormwater transports pollutants and chemicals that are used in our yards can get washed into our storm drain systems, into water bodies that ultimately have a connection. They travel often to our creeks travel often to sinkholes that lead directly to the aquifer. Things like pesticides and herbicides can harm our aquatic species. And those springs that we talk about, if you've lived here for any length of time at all, you know that we have some algae issues that crop up. And part of those algae issues can be attributed to too many nutrients in the water. So if we can curb our fertilizer use, that's really going to have a positive impact on water quality. And Florida Friendly Landscaping really encourages the limitation of chemical use, right? So they have integrative pest management. Cynthia is going to be talking more about the principles, so I'll leave that to her. But it really does reduce our chemical impacts by supporting Florida Friendly Landscaping. It also really makes economic sense for us to support sustainable practices because our lakes, springs, and rivers are really economically important. They drive tourism dollars, not just for people who come from all of the surrounding areas, but even locally. So we get tourist dollars from all over. I meet people from Germany, I meet people from all different regions who are here just to visit our springs or to travel in our rivers. So it really is economically important for us to protect our water. It also saves us money. So when it comes to HOA communities, you can save money in those common areas if you're not using so much water. There's not so much chemical application. That really helps your HOA to save money now. And also we're helping to save money later because if we have to seek alternative water supplies, that tends to be much, much more expensive. So we're really protecting the almighty dollar also. Before I talk about the HOA Florida Friendly Landscaping Code, I do want to mention a few of the other codes we have in place that are also meant to protect our water. One is the fertilizer ordinance, and the fertilizer ordinance applies throughout Alachua County. It really, I'm not going to go through all of the details, but basically our fertilizer is now permitted just during the growing season from March through June, and it has to have at least a 50% slow release nitrogen. So this is really another means of protecting our water from too many nutrients in the water that can disrupt those systems. Fertilizer with phosphorus is not permitted unless there is a soil or tissue test that verifies a need. And that's really because we have such an abundant amount of phosphorus here locally. Our irrigation restrictions, so these apply countywide. They are the maximum. Really what we suggest is turning your system off, and only if you've got an irrigation system, only operate it as needed, and that's the best way to conserve water. If you do use your irrigation, these restrictions are enforced year-round, and it's based on house number. So we have 2 days of watering permitted in the spring and summer, and just 1 day of watering permitted in the winter when plants go dormant. We really suggest you turn your systems off at that time. But this helps to, again, protect our water resources. Also, we have an irrigation design code. I don't have a slide for that, but I did want to mention it briefly. And the design code's really more about how efficiently new systems that are going in are. So it kind of regulates how systems are being put in to make sure they're maximally efficient. And that code was recently changed to kind of limit the amount of area where permanent irrigation is permitted. So it's all about protecting water resources, and that leads us to the Florida Friendly Landscaping Code. So in the interest of protecting Florida's water, in 2009, Florida legislature found that the use of things like Florida Friendly Landscaping and other preventive measures served a compelling public interest, and that it was really important that HOAs and local governments participate for water conservation and water pollution prevention for the state. So they adopted Florida Statute 373.185 that says deed restrictions, covenants, or local ordinances cannot prohibit or be enforced so as to prohibit the implementation of Florida-friendly practices. So that was done in 2009, but there wasn't really an agency that was overseeing this. So a lot of times if there were disagreements between homeowners and HOAs, it led to costly court cases, and it really dragged on. Also, without a specific agency involved, it could be really difficult to determine what's Florida friendly and what's not Florida friendly. It could be a bit subjective. So Alachua County adopted that state statute into local code so that we could kind of support in these cases and help avoid those lengthy court battles and lots of money here. So in addition to that, we adopted that same state language, but we also have that deed restrictions or covenants after October 2019 can't require a property owner to have permanent irrigation system on their property. I'm going to pause here and I want to emphasize that this code does not say if you want to have Florida friendly landscaping and you live in an HOA, as long as your yard is Florida friendly landscapes, you can do as you wish, right? So that's not the purpose of the code. We do want to encourage Florida friendly landscaping in general, and we're encouraging HOAs to continue to move in that direction. However, homeowners still need to follow their HOA process for making landscaping changes. So I just want to emphasize that before we continue here. So HOA may have restrictions on Florida-friendly landscaping. So we know that these deed restrictions and covenants are really in place because these communities want to maintain community character. And that means they can still dictate what plants you may use. They have to provide a Florida-friendly option, but they may dictate specific plants from that list that can be used, and they can dictate the percent cover of specific plants. Okay, now let's just go ahead and move right into some examples when we're talking about the code here. So in this first example, we have an HOA that allows St. Augustine grass. And that's the only grass that they have, or excuse me, not grass, but only plant they're including as an option. But some residents want to do Bahia grass. You can see in this image here, the grass looks great, no problems here. There's a minimal use of fertilizers, pesticides, or herbicides that are used to maintain the grass. The turf is doing really well, and there are no reports of having to resod yards. In this case, even though the homeowners may want to have a different type of grass, St. Augustine is a Florida-friendly option, and it's the right plant in the right place. So the HOA would not be prohibiting the implementation of Florida-friendly landscaping by requiring that St. Augustine. Let's look at another case here. So this is a lot different, and this is something that we run into often. In this case, the HOA only allows St. Augustine grass, but the homeowner is proposing an alternative Florida-friendly option. In this case, the site conditions on that property have really changed over time, and there are mature trees that are shading this area. Homeowners are having a hard time keeping St. Augustine grass alive. They're having to resod, and there may be issues with pests or fungus, so they're having to apply chemicals to treat the grass. In this case, the St. Augustine grass is no longer the right plant in the right place. So it would not be Florida friendly to make homeowners have St. Augustine in these areas. The HOA would be prohibiting the implementation of Florida friendly landscaping, and they would be considered in violation of the code. Oops. Sorry, it's paused here for a second for some reason. Okay, sorry about that. Let's see. Okay, so what is our conflict resolution process? So when a disagreement may arise between a homeowner and the HOA, first thing is the environmental protection staff will discuss the code with all parties so that everyone's clear on the code. Sometimes that can resolve things early on. If there's still a disagreement after everyone's sure they understand the limits of the code, the parties are referred to Alachua County Extension for a site visit and for Florida-friendly recommendations. And that would be Cynthia right now as the extension agent that we work with for these site visits. If that's still, usually most of our cases up to this point have been resolved at that level, right? So we get to the site recommendation, then the property owner and the HOA gets that information. They work together to find a resolution, a species that will work, or they come to terms with that. If that doesn't work and there's still a disagreement, environmental protection may hire an independent expert who can make a determination about Florida-friendly landscaping in that case. If the HOA is not compliant for some reason, enforcement options would include citations, notice of violations, or a special magistrate hearing. Okay, and so this first point is really related to the HOA, Florida Friendly Landscaping Code. The second point is not, but I wanted to bring up some updated code requirements that are in place because we have maybe some HOA management representatives here. So it was recently adopted into our code that HOAs need to keep a current contact on file with our county. And if you did not receive an email from Eliana Barty this week regarding that, please, her name is on her contact information is on the last slide, so you can reach out to her. Also, another point I wanted to mention for code requirements is that commercial irrigation systems now have to be registered, and they must submit an annual inspection report that documents their water conservation repairs and other actions that they've taken. This is really to create a little more accountability It's always been a requirement for both residential and commercial properties to do an annual inspection and to do the maintenance needed for the system. But it hasn't really been enforced. It's a hard one to enforce. So this registration really helps there to be a little more accountability. We see a lot of water waste in commercial systems over time when they're not maintained. With that in mind, I did want to mention there is a new rebate program that is available for water conservation. And Eliana is the person to contact there. I'm seeing now that I'm going over my time. You can hit this QR code here to inquire about the rebate program. For residents, it's up to 2,000, and for commercial properties, it's up to 8,000. So let me go ahead and now stop sharing and turn this over to Cynthia.
Thank you, Holly.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm going to try and power through these principles. The nice thing about the principles is that they're on the FFL website. So if you can't remember a principle or you don't know what's involved in that principle, there are definitely resources to double check. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hope everyone can see that.
He can't see it yet, Cynthia.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, okay. All right. Why am I? Here we go. Okay, so see if that's gonna progress. No, it's frozen. Hold on. I had this all set up before. Hold on. Ah. Shoot. Hold on. I lost my screen. Now it's working. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Perfect.
All right. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So for Florida friendly landscaping, Holly had mentioned that we have the principles. And basically for these principles, these are kind of these guidelines for helping, understand what you can have in your yards. But the Florida friendly landscaping, this is an integrated approach that's going to be environmentally sustainable and friendly to wildlife. It can be less work, it can be less maintenance, although there might be some initial maintenance or efforts up front to plan and make sure that this is going to be a landscape that works for you. But the overall goal really of the Florida friendly landscaping is to conserve water and to protect that water quality that Holly was talking about. Okay, so the 9 principles, these are a collection of practices involving design, installation, the operation and maintenance of the landscape, and again, intended to reduce the irrigation and protect the water quality so that we can reduce the amount of fertilizers and other pollutants that may be entering into our water system, our watersheds. So the 9 principles are: 1, right plant, right place; 2, water efficiently; 3, fertilize appropriately; 4, mulch; 5, attract wildlife; 6, manage yard pests; 7, sorry, that didn't get in there, recycle yard waste; 8, reduce stormwater runoff; and 9, protect the waterfront. So we're going to go through all of those really quickly. I know we're kind of running out of time here. Principle number one, right plant, right place. If you're going to focus on any principle, I always say focus on this one first, because if you get this one right, usually all the other ones fall into place. And basically what this means is that you want to have a plant that's thriving in the area that it is, which means you have it in a place where it's getting the right amount of water, it's getting the right amount of light, the climate conditions are good for that plant. When you have a plant that's in an area where it can't thrive or where it's struggling, that those plants tend to need more attention. They're going to need, more inputs from the homeowner. So we're trying to reduce that number of inputs, because once plants get established in a landscape, they shouldn't need a lot of additional fertilizer or water to keep them going. We want plants that can establish in the landscape and then do really fine on their own once they're there. So making sure, this is where, and analyzing your landscape, knowing where the light hits, knowing what the water conditions are in your yard, and focusing on the right plants to put in those areas. That's going to get that first principle, and it's going to help you with the rest of them, and you'll have happier plants and happier landscapes. All right, principle number 2, water efficiently. Of course, right, we're all about reducing irrigation and protecting that water quality. And that really starts with knowing how much you're watering your yard, and do you need to water your landscape? How often are you watering your landscape? Make sure that you are, if you have an irrigation system in place, that you know what your controller is doing. You know that the schedule that's on there, are you watering at the right times, especially if there's any ordinances for watering? Also make sure that you don't have any leaks in your system, and that that you have a rain shutoff device. That's another requirement, is that if you're going to have an irrigation system, that you're not watering when it's raining out, or you're not watering when it's about to rain. And considering this past winter, where typically we have a dry winter, but we've had kind of a wet winter this winter. So that's where it's really important to have some type of rain sensor, or be monitoring your irrigation so you're just not watering mindlessly. Okay, and just wanted to put up that sign. I know Holly had this in her presentation as well. Just be aware that in Alachua County, we do have some irrigation restrictions. So you need to know when those are. It's basically summer and winter. We're in the winter one right now. I believe these go with the time change. So when you time change, you got the irrigation change as well. Principle number 3, fertilize appropriately. Again, just as we're talking about minimizing our water inputs, basically optimizing the water input for our plants, we want to optimize our fertilizers as well. Many plants don't need fertilizer once they're past establishment. And this is applying to the ornamentals. You may need to apply fertilizer, if that the plant is going to bloom, or it's going into a particular type of season where it's going to need extra nutrient input. But we highly and strongly always recommend that you get a soil test, so that you know what the status of the nutrients are in your soil in your particular yard. And if you have a really large area, you might want to do several samples to find out how that nutrient might vary throughout the space in your yard. That's going to be basically your baseline. It's going to be basically what we are able to then recommend in terms of plants, and in terms of things that you may need to do to also optimize nutrient uptake, which means understanding the pH of your soil. So doing that basic soil test, understanding whether your plants really do need additional fertilizer. Many of them don't, especially once they get established. Again, Alachua County has our fertilizer regulations. So right now we are not fertilizing, mostly because typically in the winter, many plants go dormant. They're not taking up nutrients actively. So if you're putting fertilizers out, they're not going to be really taking up those nutrients anyway. So we only want to apply nutrients when we know the plants are actively growing. And so that's where the fertilizer ban really kind of comes into effect, because it's trying to maximize when those plants can actually take up those fertilizers and those nutrients. Principle number 4 is mulch. Mulch is a great way. I call it the insulator of the soil, right? It really is going to keep soil moisture in. It's going to buffer those soil temperatures, especially when you have cold or hot extremes. Having a nice 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch is really going to help protect your plants. And again, kind of, minimize loss of, nutrients and water from the system. And they're also really great at inhibiting weed growth. It's not a foolproof weed barrier, but a nice, healthy, usually 2 to 3 inches of mulch. If you maintain that, that's going to be a great way to limit the number of weeds entering into your landscape. And it also provides, it gives that nice delineation between, maybe a ground cover, a turf, and your landscape. It can really kind of clean up boundaries and really delineate a landscape. Principle number 5 is attract wildlife, right? We are really fortunate here in Florida. We have some amazing wildlife, especially when it comes to birds and pollinators. And so we want to attract those into our yards because as our urban areas are expanding, we want to provide refuge for those wild animals, especially, those animals that may be migrating through Florida on their way north and south as they migrate throughout the year. So creating food and forage, maybe think about having plants that can provide food such as berries, seeds to local wildlife. Or providing that habitat refuge. So like vertically layering your plants. So you're providing different places of refuge and habitat for various types of animals, depending on what layer of the forest or what layer of the ecosystem they might use. You can create those habitats in your yard as well. Thinking about maybe what trees or what shrubs might be a home to a bird or even bats. The more wildlife you attract, you'll notice you'll have a more balanced system too, because those animals are going to be part of that ecosystem and balancing out both maybe those pesky insects that we don't want in our yard with the good ones that we do. Manage landscapes pest responsibly. This is kind of the always kind of, I think, of the turn of the principle number 5. We want to encourage the beneficial insects. We want to encourage those insects that are going to benefit our plants, as well as control the insects that we don't want. But that also means that we need to be conscious of what herbicides and insecticides and things we're putting into the environment to control the things that we don't want to have there. Make sure we're not taking out, throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I always hate that analogy, but it is that thing. We don't want to throw out the good with the bad. So integrated pest management is something that we talk about in extension and with the Master Gardener program, but it's something everybody can do. And it's basically a balanced approach to controlling pests and managing pests in your yard. And if you do have any questions about any of these principles or how to address these principles, at the end, I'll have a slide about how you can reach out to our extension office and our Master Gardener help desk line so that you can get those questions answered. All right, principle number 7, recycle yard waste. This one and the next one, it's all about keeping nutrients, keeping things that are on your property or in your landscape, and not letting them flow or, leave your property. Recycle, when we're talking about mulch or leaf clippings or yard clippings, all that's nutrients that when you remove it from your yard, you're taking it away. So we really want to retain those nutrients in your landscape. So think about maybe composting or how you can mulch things. Using clippings or pine needles as your mulch can mean reduced costs of having to buy that mulch. So the more that you can recycle within your yard, that organic material, you're going to be adding that back into your yard. It's less maybe fertilizer inputs that you have to use, as well as that means there's less of that nutrient going off-site and potentially into our water systems. Principle number 8, that's now, related to reducing that stormwater runoff that Holly talked about. And it's really, again, making sure that we keep the water on the property. Don't let it run off into the road where it's going to, go somewhere else. Try and keep it within the property. And that way too, you're minimizing the things that are carried off with that water, like pollutants or nutrients that are going to, you know, fill into our waterways and potentially lead to, you know, algae growth or invasive species, taking advantage of those extra nutrients in those areas. So the more we can reduce the amount of runoff, and there's lots of creative ways. We got rain barrels. You can have diversion systems or ways that you can retain the water on your yard. The better it'll be to kind of keep that water and those nutrients where they on your yard, in your landscape. And then principle number 9, protect the waterfront. A lot of times when we do this slide, everyone's like, well, I don't live next to the waterfront. But if you're in Florida, there's most likely there's some sort of retention pond. There's probably some sort of stream that's very close by. We are surrounded by water and we are surrounded by water bodies. So being conscious of knowing where those water bodies and water systems are, especially near your property, means that you want to try and protect those areas. Those are direct entryways into our water system. And so we want to make sure that the buffers, the areas around those waterfront areas are maintained so that any nutrients or, you know, anything trying to enter into that system has to slow down and it has to kind of be filtered before it can enter into that system. So being conscious of where maybe your retention or overflow area is in your neighborhood can be really helpful for protecting that water body. So there's a few additional resources. If you would like to know about the 9 principles and more about Florida friendly landscaping, please visit our IFAS, IFAS Florida friendly landscaping website. There's some also really neat apps. You can get them right on your phone. So the information is really handy. Our extension office, especially if you're a newcomer, or if you want to know more about the landscape resources available to you specifically in this county, we have a great Alachua County homeowners landscape guide that you can get through this link or this QR code. And also, again, if you have any questions, any gardening, plant related questions, please email our Master Gardener Help Desk. We'll be happy to, you know, connect you with the resources or answer your plant questions. And specifically, if you have any FFL, we can help you with that. So these are our resources here. Just so you know, I'm the residential horticulture person. So anything that's regarding homeowners or residential, I'm the one that covers that. And then we also have Dr. Tatiana Sanchez. She's our commercial horticulture. And so she helps serve those more commercial landscapes or the companies that provide those landscape services. And I know we don't have time for questions, so I'm going to skip that, but I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer Marvin. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Cynthia. So my name, let me share first here.
Make sure it works.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get the, let's see. Here we go. Just one second. I am trying to get the, hold on. I'm sorry, just one more minute.
It's these dual screens.
I know, I actually don't have a dual screen. Okay, can you see my, any of my show? No, okay, hold on.
Not yet.
All right. Sorry, I usually work with 2 screens. Just 1 minute. Let me share again. You'd think I've never done this before.
And everybody, we did practice before this.
Yes.
But,
all right, I can tell that.
Okay, so we see your presentation, just not in presenter view.
Okay, let me see here.
I think if you just click on from the beginning there, maybe that'll do it.
Okay. I was trying to get my notes slides, but I can do it without it. All right, so my name's Jen Marvin. I am the Florida friendly for residential landscapes or for home landscapes statewide coordinator for the Florida Friendly Landscaping Office. I didn't say that quite as well as everybody else did, but so that means that I work with residents and people around the state, and I work with agents, and in order to provide you with information about HOAs and how to work with them. We also have a big body of knowledge in the UF system, UF IFAS system. I'm going to share one of those papers with you today. This is the 10 strategies for working with your homeowner association to convert a yard to a Florida friendly yard. This is written by one of my colleagues, and it is, gosh, I'm not sure even how old it is now, but it is a perfect example of how to work with your HOA. What we can say about HOAs is they are responsible for environmental health and function of large swaths of green space. So if you think about your HOA and how much land your HOA covers, how much land that is, a neighborhood, like a park or what's it called, green space in your area, your HOA has a great deal of say over what happens to that and your yard. So they exert a significant influence on aesthetic preferences, cultural norms, environmental outcomes. And so when you are working with your HOA, you need an educated approach to show them exactly what you're going to be doing. And then what this will do is help you get that approval. It will help you not make mistakes while going through the approval. And so we're going to start with really quick a little information about HOAs. In Florida, the percent of population that lives in HOAs is 44.8%, and homeowning residents 25.1%. Almost 49,000 HOAs are in Florida. Roughly 9.65 people in Florida live in HOA communities, and an estimated 3.71 million homes in Florida are in HOA communities. This information I got from iProperty Manage. It's using census data and some other data. This, the top box about Florida is from a very, I think from census data, and so is very reputable. In the US, 82 of newly constructed homes sold in 2021 were part of HOA communities. 53% of all homeowners live in HOAs. Let's see, 40 million housing units are part of HOAs communities, and there are roughly 8,000 new HOA communities each year. And that just goes to show you how important it is to take your piece of property and your piece of land and try to work at becoming Florida friendly. Try to make your piece of the world a better place for nature and for our water, and our streams, and protect it for yourself and for your children. So what I'm going to do is go through these strategies one by one very quickly. You can always go back and read that paper. So the first one is becoming familiar with Florida friendly landscaping. This is our website homepage. The QR code is directly to the homepage. We have areas for home landscapes, community landscapes, professional landscapes, and also it will explain the 9 principles in much more detail than Cynthia had time to do today. That what she did is usually done in like an hour and a half. So she did a great job, paring it down. These are 2 guides. This is the plant selection and design guide, and this is the home landscapes guide. This one, home landscapes, provides all the information about the 9 principles and the reasonings behind it. This is the plant selection guide. It gives you a list of plants. These are both available from the UF IFAS bookstore. And we are selling them because we need to make money back to print them, but we're selling them at cost. So they're available to you. They're also available as PDFs online. This is the FFL plant guide, which is the same thing as the book. It's offered browser, iOS, or Android. And then some of our other related applications, they are all free. Feel free to take advantage of them. Another one is our homeowner webinar series. It's every third Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. Eastern. That information can be found also where Cynthia pointed out in resources. We've got a community landscape template for maintenance, and then a codes and covenants template for incorporating FFL into your codes and covenants in your HOA. The second part is understanding the law. We went over this already: conserving water, protecting the environment, that it's adaptable to local conditions and drought tolerant. But the nuance is that HOA documents may not prohibit any property owner from implementing FFL, but they are allowed for reasonable limits on FFL, such as one of the other presenters said, St. Augustine grass. Your HOA is allowed to say you must have St. Augustine grass, because St. Augustine grass is a Florida friendly grass, and if it is not, if it is healthy and the appropriate plant, you can't really challenge that. They are allowing you to practice, Florida friendly. Same thing can be said with a rain barrel or certain other elements that you would have in your yard to be Florida friendly. So, and the other thing that was already stated is that this law does not invalidate your HOA agreement. If your agreement says you need to get previous approval, you must get previous approval. And if they say no, then you can't do it. So what I'm going to tell you now is how you become familiar with your HOA regulations and rules. So some of the things you want to ask are, you want to review your association approval process and the codes and covenants documents. So you want to ask things like, are construction and/or landscape plans required to submit to the HOA board? Does the board have sole discretion for the approval, or is there a landscape committee or an architectural review board that will be deciding if the plans you submit will go through? Is approval required in writing? How long does the board have to give you an answer? Sometimes it's a month. And if it's after a month, then you can go back to them and you just have to know what to expect. And does approval apply to modification of landscaping, including planting and removal of plants? What exactly does approval mean you can do? These things you will find in your codes and covenants document, and it will keep you from being surprised later. So some of the things you can do to become familiar: meet with your HOA board members, check the plants listed and the regulations in your codes and covenants, check for turf requirements. There might be a requirement for a certain amount of turf. You don't want to have this designed or design it yourself and realized, oh, I had to have, I can only have 20% turf. I had to have 40% turf and have to go back and go through the whole thing again. Note restricted elements. I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. Read your association newsletter. There are tons of examples in your newsletter of things that your board likes and likes other people to do. Review your property boundary survey so that you know what is able for you to be landscaped, where there are utilities, that kind of thing. And then also talk to your neighbors who have been through the approval process, so that you can see, what sort of things they ask. What can you do that will give you a better chance to be approved? Some of that is going to go with aesthetics. So observe landscapes in your community, study your style of neighborhood, notice the arrangements of plants in your neighborhood, what plants are used, how the turf is used, how it's shaped, and material choices like hardscape and pavers and types of mulch. So the next step is to do that for other communities that you like. You know, you can collect photos of other FFL yards. Do you like them? Why do you like them? Do they fit into your neighborhood aesthetic? And include applications in your board photo or your application to your boards, sorry. So the next thing is to take that survey that you had and do an inventory and analysis of your yard. So you know everything about your yard. You want to write down, this in the background is an example of an analysis. Actually, it's an inventory. So what you want to do is write down everything you know about your yard on a piece of paper on the survey. So, you know, here it says high point. This is how the water drains. Here's an existing tree. Here's a high sun area, good views and bad views, you know, what's too small, you know, I need a workspace here. The analysis is what you're going to do about it. So, you know, the high sun area, do you not want a high sun area? So you want to plant trees there. Do you want a high sun area? So you can have a garden, like a vegetable garden, you know, good views from the house. Does that mean that you don't want to plant tall plants in that area so you can see the view past the landscaping? You're interpreting the inventory. And in that entire process, you are also gathering soil samples to send. And like I said, analyzing the site conditions. So you know exactly what plants fit in what places. Again, strategy 7, create a list of Florida-friendly plants. First, like I said, check to make sure that there is not already a list that you have to choose from. And again, it's already been said that that's acceptable. As long as there are Florida-friendly plants on the list, your HOA is allowed to dictate which plants you can and cannot plant. You can obviously compare your list with that list, you know, and then research what turf you have in your neighborhood and in the area in general, just to double check that that is, you know, the correct turf. And this is a QR code for the Plant Guide app that I showed you earlier. This book is the same thing as the app. The app has 400 plants and is searchable by a number of different attributes and by your zip code. So strategy 8 is use hardscape or ground cover in your yard. So what you want to do is design first with hardscape, where you're going to walk, where your patios are going to be, what that looks like in your yard, and then you know, determine functional places for those activities so that you can have that patio where you want to have the barbecue generally, or where you want a dog run. And you know, you want to use plant beds and turf for spatial organization of your landscape. And you want to think of ease and maintenance when you're creating those spatial, you know, those little landscape rooms. Ease of maintenance would mean like the curve of the garden bed, so you don't have to like mow into those little corners, like where your gates or your fence comes together, which always gets me. And then you want to see what other materials you can incorporate, like ground covers, rock paths or gravel paths, garden walls, decorative fences, mulch, garden structures. Make sure you check your codes and covenants to see if you are allowed garden gnomes, or if you are allowed a bench, you know, in your front yard. I'll tell you now that Florida Friendly Landscaping does not encourage gravel or rocks as mulch, but you can use it as a pathway. Let's see. And then strategy 9, this looks like a hard thing to do. This is not like what most people expect, what most HOAs expect. They want to see, you know, what plants you are going to put in what place. So this would be considered a master plan. If you're doing your backyard, don't, you know, if you're redoing your backyard, don't do the whole thing unless you want a master plan to implement later. But what you want to do is point out where in these areas you want the certain plants that you've chosen, and be ready to say why you've put them there. And you want to include photos of those plants with the plan, so you can show how your plan integrates into your neighborhood. And again, developing a landscape plan, this is above and beyond, but this is sort of gives you an idea of how you would visualize what that area would look like if you planted the plants that you want to, and include trees that are existing or proposed, plant beds, utilities, other features, and the views. Finally, include a description in the application. So explain the neighborhood fit. If there's a turf strip next to the streets, you don't necessarily want to plant that turf with something other than what is already growing in your neighborhood. So if it's usually turf, it's usually grass, you might not be allowed to do something that is that different from the rest of your neighborhood. You want to explain similar plants as your neighborhood and plant shapes and forms and bed forms, and then explain your plant choices so that if there is a question about whether a plant can or cannot be used, that in the area where there's more drainage, you should use a plant that likes wet feet. And, by going through these resources that we're giving you, you will understand that and you'll know that. So, explain your plant choices and the how it's going to lower your water use, how long-lived your landscape will be, how the aesthetic fits in, and newly proposed plants if you'd like to see them on your HOA's list. Finally, the bottom line with HOAs, they are there to protect your property value, and they expect a certain aesthetic and a certain way that landscapes fit in to that aesthetic. So you want to think about that when you're designing, but that doesn't mean you can't be Florida friendly. Florida friendly can look like a lot of different things. It's the way you maintain it. It's the choices that you make and the plants that you choose. So you want to assure the board members that your landscape will not deviate greatly from the neighborhood aesthetic or look. Assure them that it will be maintained. That's a big deal when people hear Florida friendly. Some people think it's a messy aesthetic, that it's not formal, that it's not, whatever they think it's not. It is a maintained look. We're not, that's part of the program. And then the key is to know and use strategies that work with the codes and covenants of your neighborhood. So make sure that you know what you're getting into, what you have to do specifically, how the process works. And then, if you have special asks, you've done your research, you can, possibly ask for a new plant or, and also get involved with your HOA. If you have a problem with what they're doing now, get involved and have a say. So these, hopefully I didn't go over too far. This is the floridafriendlylandscaping.com website that I showed earlier. In case there were other people, I know we advertised this statewide. So if you are not in Alachua County, you can find your county extension office here. I will say Alachua County has the most unique Florida friendly codes, and it's probably the only county in the state that has this program. And again, here's my address. Feel free to contact me if you have questions or after this presentation. I'm sorry I had to go by so fast, but I can answer questions later if we have time. So thank you.
And we do have a couple of minutes. I know Mary raised her hand way early in the presentation. So if you're still on, Mary, and you want to ask your question, please go ahead and do so. And we've been answering some of the questions on the chat. If you have more questions there, please feel free to put them in and we'll try and answer really quickly. We just have a couple of minutes if anybody does want to ask a question. Otherwise, we can let everyone go. And Linda also has raised her hand. So go ahead and unmute yourselves and ask the question.
Yes, I have a neighbor who has giant Brazilian peppers that are growing into trees. And I'm just wondering, is there any kind of, I live in Hillsborough County in an HOA area, but I just am I mean, it's like an ecological cancer next door. And she's got 3 enormous, they are just overwhelming my own yard, actually. And I just wondered if you have any ideas about what to do. Because I tried to talk to her about it and she was like, oh, I like the green area. And I think I might have to say, you know, there's still a hedge behind it. We could still kill the Brazilian pepper, but I just don't know what you would suggest.
That can be a challenging one. I've watched my family, my parents lived in Melbourne, and I've sort of watched over the years as that plant has creeped up. We don't have to deal with that as much here in Alachua County. But you know, directing them to IFAS documents might be helpful if your neighbor is open to it. Sometimes the more they learn about what the issue is, I think there's some good pictures that detail just what a nuisance the species is and how invasive it is. So maybe directing them to some information might be useful.
I would also say you contact your local county extension agent as well. Your local county extension agent knows so much more about these issues and you know, what has been done about them, what can be done about them, than any, like me at the state office in Gainesville would know. Or so contact your county extension office. You can Google your county plus UFIFAS extension office, and it will bring up the web page link to that web page. So that for most of the people who are not in Alachua County and have specific questions like that, that is what I would do. That's what
Thank
you're
you.
paying for. So yeah, that's what I would say to do.
Thank
If
you.
you are in Alachua County, I'll put that last picture up. I'm Cynthia and Jen, thank you for adjusting. I know I went a little over on my time despite my many practices to make sure I didn't. I'll put the information if you're interested in inquiring about the HOA Florida Friendly Landscaping Code specifically, or any of those new local code requirements that we discussed. I will put the contact slide that has Eliana's information and my information up before we go here.
And I did want to mention something else that was brought up in the chat as well as in the presentations. There are tons of Florida friendly plants on the list, lots of them. And so as an HOA and as a community, please keep in mind that when you do provide a plant list, you need to provide a variety of FFL plants. If your plant list is entirely sun-loving plants, but some of your residents have lots of shade, that's not going to be sufficient and that's not going to work. And like the person on the chat mentioned, you know, just because a plant is on the list, you still have to take into account the site conditions to make sure that it's the right plant for that particular growing condition.
Absolutely true.
And we do really suggest for HOA representatives that might be here, you know, we really encourage the idea that as landscapes change over time, you really want to have options available that address those changing needs. Because like that example that we had, the St. Augustine grass, at first, when the trees were really young and it was doing well, it might have been the right plant in the right place. But having options for when landscapes change is really, really valuable, really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like went over it really quickly, but understanding how big your plants are going to get is probably one of our, it's usually the mature landscapes that we're dealing with in terms of when sometimes we have this conflict, because the original conditions worked, and now that the plants are bigger, now the conditions aren't the same. So really good point, Holly.
And
That's a
so
driving point by Eliana there too. So I have to share that credit.
we're a little over 5 o'clock. I don't see any more questions in the chat. If anybody has a last minute burning question, this is your chance. Otherwise, we're going to end this webinar, and hopefully, you know how to get in touch with us, so you know how to contact us at any point if any questions come up later on.
And with that, I'm sharing this screen with the last time that has Eliana's information on it. It has mine with specifics to the code. But you can reach out to any one of us and we'll direct you to the right person.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Sorry for the slight rush there, guys.
It's okay.
Thank you all.
It's okay. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up. Everybody have a good
Sounds good.
afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great night.